So why are we talking about national industrialization? What is Anak Bayan Toronto's perspective? Well, in Anak Bayan, we recognize that the Philippines is an extremely rich country. We have soil that is perfect for agriculture, uh, minerals like gold and silver, healthy waters that are filled with valuable marine life, and suitable conditions for our water to be a source for irrigation and electricity. So even though the Philippines is very rich in natural resources, Filipinos remain extremely poor, with very little of the profit extracted from our land actually going towards our people. So 4.5 million Filipinos today are homeless, and 9.7 million live are informal settlers. So meaning they occupy spaces and housing sites that they do not legally own. So the Philippines, this is why we say the Philippines is rich, but the people are poor. This is because the people that benefit most from our country's natural wealth are foreign investors like mining companies from Canada, large landowners, and bureaucrat capitalists in government who are often landowners themselves. So essentially, the ruling class benefits from our riches while the people who produce the value continue to receive the crumbs. So this leaves our country unable to industrialize, resulting in limited opportunities for people to find work. Which in turn forces many Filipinos to find work abroad, for their families so that they can survive. So we believe that in national industrialization, in which Filipinos control the land and resources, will lead to a situation where Filipinos are empowered and do not have to resort to leaving their homes and families behind to survive in a foreign country. So we believe in national industrialization because we believe in the potential that our country has to serve the needs of our own people and put our own interests ahead of a small, wealthy elite. So with that being said, we want to introduce our first speaker of the night, someone to talk about national industrialization, AGHAM, Advocates of Science and Technology for the People. So AGHAM quickly is an organization of patriotic pro-people scientists, engineers, and science and technology advocates bonded together by a common goal of promoting science and technology that genuinely serve the interests of the Filipino people. They conduct direct technical service to communities through research and push advocacy through various forms, not only limited to research, but education, fora, and discussion groups. So our speakers tonight are Jill Banta. Jill is a science and development worker based in Mindanao, whose work focuses on the intersection of waste, plastic pollution, and environmental justice. She's a member of AGHAM Educators and Liang Network. Another speaker from AGHAM, Marlon Pareja, is an associate professor of biology of the College of Science and Computer Studies of De La Salle University, Das Marinas. So I'm gonna give it off to Jill and Marlon. Thank you.
All right, good evening. Thank you for inviting AGHAM, Advocates of Science and Technology for the People. Our discussion will revolve around the need for national industrialization. But before that, I will share a bit about the current state of science and technology in the Philippines and how it is linked to our struggle for national industrialization. My kasama, Marlon, will talk about the characteristics of national industrialization and what we can do together to promote it. So before we start, just a question, no? What do you know about the current situation in the Philippines? So please type your answers on the Zoom chat box. So Isa said that there's exploitation of workers and peasants, and there is also resistance against this exploitation. Benjamin said no facilities to produce steel or cement. Rosie shared that there's no adequate response to COVID-19. Jill Ann shares that we still use Carabao. This is for farming, no? And Fatima, no, also knows that there's a crackdown on activists through the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or NTF-LCAC. There's a militarized COVID-19 response. Philippines is very resource rich, and you're all correct, no? I'm pleased that you know a lot about the Philippines, even though we're miles away, from Canada. And everything you mentioned is not far from what is happening here. The Filipino people are truly at the losing end of watched pandemic response. Here's a short video summarizing the recent events in the fascist and anti-people Duterte regime.
You should have been downtown. The people are rising. We thought it was a lockdown. They opened the fire. Them bullets was flying. Who said it was a lockdown? Goddamn lie. Oh my, time heals old, but you out of time now. You gotta watch us for the clock down.
That a 38-year-old female Chinese patient
hazmat for the next round. We was trying to protest and the fires broke out. Look out for the secret agents, they be planted in the crowd. Said it's civil unrest, but you sleep so sound like you don't hear the screams when we catching beat down. Stand quiet when they killing niggas, but you speak loud. Right, got opinions coming from the first sicker than the COVID. How they live on the ground. Speaking of the COVID, cause it's still going around. Won't you tell me about the looting? What's that really all about? Cause they throw away black lives like paper towels plus unemployment rate. What, 40 million now? Killed a man in broad day. Might never see a trial. We just wanna break chains like slaves in the south. Started in the north end, but we in the downtown. Riot cops try to block, now we got a showdown. Down. You should have been downtown. The people are rising. We thought it was a lockdown. They opened the fire. Them bullets was flying. Who said it was a lockdown? Goddamn lie.
Turn on YouTube, dog, look how they do us. Knee on our necks, bullets in backs, stimulus checks, strictly for blacks. History repeating, people scared to eat a chicken. Everybody going vegan, what they put in it. Look at the world we living in, they got a shook in it. You going, you jogged, and your color might get you took in it. The man in the mirror can't look away, you gotta look at it. Black lives matter, so what it means when they shoot at it. Generation genocide, what happened to Enterprise, hurt the man infiltrated. Black Panther re-energized, ain't nothing to figure out. They trying to kill us out. If I take a nail, see my fist, I'm a killer now. Just think, bullshit you gotta filter out. Are you really ready for the smoke like a Swisher House? Ready for the revolution? Who ready to ride? It won't be televised, so tell me who ready to die. If downtown going up, where we at with the shits? We at the liquor store, nigga, about to get us a fifth. No, they about to start looting, grab the gloves and masks. Watch out for them tanks when they rolling past, shit.
Never understand why they do it. Someone cut the channel off the news before I lose it. I ain't even tripping, if you with it, then we lootin'. Help me put this Louis in the back of Suzuki. Oh, he had to break it down so smoothly. They gon' say it's not about race, but we moving. Oh, pow, cut the trade pound, had to put them in my name. Wish a nigga play now. Any given day, I'll be headed to the pulpit. Say a little prayer, matter of fact, I need two of them. Ooh, only do it, only do it. Ooh, this ain't 92, so we in the new rules. Niggas got hips, so we don't lose the projects. About to hit Rodale with my little cousin Marcus. Someone threw a whole brick in the Neiman Marcus. Help me put the whole mannequin in the charger. You should have been downtown. The people are rising. We thought it was a lockdown. They opened the fire. Them bullets was flying. Who said it was a lockdown? Goddamn lie. Ooh-wee. Lockdown, we gotta stop. 'Cause they tell us to.
Okay, just a sec. Please hang on.
Year-old female Chinese.
Okay, hello. Okay, so this presentation, by the way, is a collective effort among our members in Agham Educators. Some of them are present here. Mike, Frank, and Reg, thank you. So from the video, no, we see that clearly there is a lack of scientific and evidence-based response to the pandemic. So instead of stepping up and improving basic services at a difficult time where thousands of Filipinos lost their jobs, the government chooses to respond with militaristic and anti-poor measures, which intend to stifle people's actions and people's responses, such as the community pantries, community kitchens, and all over the country, there is a scarcity in healthcare facilities and professionals. Just want to share that right now there are several politicians and even doctors who choose to peddle preventive meds, no, even if these medicines and treatment have poor data on their effectiveness. So now here we see how science and technology plays a huge role in national development. Of course, through scientific processes, we are able to create products and develop industry bases such as agriculture, mining, steel, cement, etc., which in turn are supposed to benefit the Filipino people. And with national development, we are able to sustain and improve our technologies and conduct more research. So the cycle goes on. No? That's how it's supposed to work. But if you look at the data, uh, we don't get to the UNESCO standards of 380 researchers per million of population. You know, there was a reported increase in 2013, which later dropped in 2015. And among the factors which we can attribute this to is the government's low prioritization of research and development, which can be shown here in the R&D expenditure. So you'll see that um, the R&D or research and development expenditure is only at 0.2% of the GDP, whereas the UNESCO standard is at 1%. And what's really saddening is that um, 76 million pesos was cut from the Department of Science and Technology research budget for 2021. No? And DOST is not even in the top 10 priority for this year's budget, even when the pandemic has made it more urgent to conduct research, no? Not only on COVID, but on ways to boost manufacturing industries. And can put this in contrast with the budget for the National Task Force to End Local uh, Communist Armed Conflict, which is a red tagging agency that has put the lives of many activists in danger. So they're getting 19 billion, which, if you think about it, could have been channeled to COVID-19 response and research and development expenditure. So the stuntedness of science and technology is reflected in the outdated farming methods, which happened because the government failed to implement a genuine agrarian reform, where the components are land distribution and mechanization of agriculture. So someone mentioned that farmers still use carabaos. No? They rely on carabaos, for agriculture, whereas in uh, industrial countries, farmers already have their own lands, and they have mechanized equipment and materials, no, in order um, to be efficient, no, in farming. And here you can see, no, that there's a 182.5% increase in science and technology workers, no, working abroad from 1990 to 2010. This is it. And this happens because there's a lack of better opportunities locally. If you listen to our science workers, or if you've met some of them there, no, in Canada, it's working here is it does it. There are so many um, hindrances into fulfilling, no, your work as a science worker. There's lack of security of tenure. Uh, they don't have benefits and welfare. A lot of them are contractuals who don't even receive their salaries on time. So they resort to borrowing money from other people. So the experience here, no, of being a science worker is there's a dire situation right now, and uh, that reflects in the Philippines' rank in terms of um, the availability of scientists and engineers. No, we rank 96 out of 139 nations. And as science workers leave the country, we see that the country has had very slow improvement in terms of the quality of education. Only 4.8% of public elementary schools have science laboratories. And there's a lack of education facilities and instructional materials. The failed pandemic response has also jeopardized students' access to quality education at a time when online learning is the most applicable mode of learning for this setting. Um, Many teachers and students, no, do not receive support in terms of materials for learning during the pandemic. So they have to find ways, no, on their own in order to continue with distance learning. We have poor national achievement test results. And from that, no, we can see that the state of the Philippine science and technology is backward and stunted. And the problems that we are facing today did not just happen overnight. It has roots in imperialism and colonization, and is linked to the export oriented and import dependent characteristics of our economy. That is brought by neoliberal policies which only favor foreign corporations. Okay. So due to the state-backed privatization of public industries and commercialization, no, of social services, our economy prioritizes over-extraction and over-exploitation of natural resources and raw materials to be exported to the capitalist countries through foreign logging and mining concessions, corporate agriculture at a minimum cost for them. And meanwhile, no, because we lack national industries, these raw materials come back to us in already processed forms, which we purchase at a more costly amount. And it is in the interest of capitalist countries to dictate neoliberal policies so that we won't be able to put up our own manufacturing industries. And some of these policies are the Mining Act of 1995, which allow foreign corporations to access and extract our minerals, the Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001, which privatized power generation, and the Oil Deregulation Law, which handed the control of the oil industry to the private sector. Here we see some of the major corporations which have their concessions, no, their factories here in the Philippines. And those from Canada may be familiar with these brands, these corporations, uh, particularly Oceana Gold, which is known to be a global mining powerhouse. And here in the Philippines, no, they have a mining concession in several areas, particularly Nueva Vizcaya, where the residents, no, from indigenous Ifugao-Tuwali tribe uh, resisted, no, the extension of the mining permit, no, which Oceana Gold is still fighting in the courts today, even if the its permits, no, are already expired. So what happened was these members of the Ifugao-Tuwali tribe, they set up their human barricade, because even if there's a ruling that Oceana Gold cannot extend their permit, uh, they still continue, you know, to visit the place and do their business there. And then there are also insurance companies which reflect, no, neoliberal uh, neoliberal type of economy that we have, where our government cannot um, provide us, no, with our or does not provide us with basic services, no, and support. Uh, so what happens is these insurance companies step in, no, in place of the government. And here is Mar Copper, which is the biggest and worst mining disaster in Philippine history. No? So what happened was in 1996, mine tailings spilled through the Boac River in Marinduque. And what's really bad, no, is that 23 years after, there's no rehabilitation. Um, and the Duterte administration even lifted the 9-year ban on new mining contracts. So now, Marlon will discuss, no, what does national industrialization have to do with solving our problems uh, here in the Philippines?
So given all the state and conditions of science and technology here in the Philippines and how it is related to the Philippine economy, why national industrialization? Why do we need to push for national industrialization? Next slide, please. Remember in our previous slide that science and technology and national development works hand in hand. National development cannot be achieved without a robust science and technology program, and science and technology is dependent on a development that is geared towards its national interest. But this is not the case for the Philippines. First, we have said that the state of science and technology in the Philippines is stunted and underdeveloped. This is shown in the dismal state of science education in the country, the lack of researchers and scientists, the lack of supporting budget for research, which is aggravated by a very low contribution of research and development to the country's production. In terms of national development, the Philippine economy is not focused towards its national interests. The economy is export-oriented and import-dependent. We export raw materials and agricultural products, extract minerals for export, but import technology, thereby creating trade deficits. The foreign companies shown to you a while ago by Jill are either mining companies, financial firms, or foreign companies that only extract the country's resources. They do not transfer technology. But the primary reason that they are here is basically for cheap labor. We all know that the natural resources of the Philippines is rich, but it is not limitless. And what would be left for the Philippines after all these resources are extracted? Next slide. That's why industrialization means a comprehensive establishment and development at all levels of the industry. The heavy industries or heavy industry factors for the creation of machine and component of production. Medium or intermediate industry or industry interiors that create spare parts for production. And light industry or light industry creates consumer products for the whole country. The base of this industry, of these industries is agriculture. That's why industrialization is very tied up to our call for genuine agrarian reform. The construction of the national industry is closely linked and integrated in agricultural development as it supplies the raw materials for manufacturing. It is therefore the base of industrialization. To do this, we need a genuine land reform to destroy the monopoly of lands by landlords and their exploitation of the peasants. At the same time, to modernize and mechanize our agricultural production to develop and ensure the supply of food and raw materials. The main factor of industrialization is the construction of heavy industries or industries that create capital goods or equipment and machinery that capitalize heavily and are used for creating other products and services. These include the steel industry, the chemicals, the oil industry, electronics, and precision instruments. From an import-dependent and export-oriented light industry, we must reorient, change, and build them to serve primarily on local needs using our own raw materials from our agriculture. Next slide. So why do we say it's national in character? Because first of all, instead of having an export-oriented, import-dependent, we push for a self-sufficient economy. And to be able to do that, and having a self-sufficient economy will be able to generate and mobilize domestic capital. Since we are gearing for a self-sufficient economy, we make sure that the processes are ecologically sound, which respects also indigenous rights. We need to address its character in nature because it also addresses domestic needs first. And by doing that, we are able to raise the purchasing power of the basic masses. And at the same time, secure jobs and livelihood for every Filipino. Next slide, please. And therefore, when we put those two words, national industrialization is the process of establishment and development of different levels and types of industries that will stimulate the economy and supply the economic needs of a nation towards transformation of its economy from agrarian, a very primitive agrarian, to industrial. Most developed countries have gone through industrialization, which they have done through land reform and monitoring of agricultural production, establishment of large factories and enterprises at various levels and sectors, and research resources and technology development and equipment used in production. But unlike the industrialization that took place in these countries, what we are pushing is not simply the establishment and development of industries. For underdeveloped countries like us, given the current export-oriented, import-dependent system of investment, production, and trade, there must be a change on the current economic system based on the exportation of raw materials produced by agriculture and mining and importation of finished products and capital. The replacement of the current system and implementation of national industrialization will set up a self-sufficient economy wherein it will not only focus on producing surplus products and profit. Instead, it will ensure that all the needs of the Filipino population are delivered. That's why, what are the key points, no, that we need to consider in when we are pursuing national industrialization? First, there must be a proper and thorough study and planning of the economy. There is an effective citizen participation in NI. So it's inclusive. NI also ensures the clever and sustainable use of natural resources, because we think that the resources are for the Filipinos. We need to have a self-sufficient economy. It's only imperative that sustainable use of these resources are provided. National industrialization also respects people's rights for safety and peaceful living. And there's also the development and improvement of the rural economy, because the primary base of NI is agriculture. And lastly, we ensure the equal relations and benefits on trade agreements with other countries. So if we can be economically independent, definitely we can have an independent foreign policy. Next slide, please. The Philippines, is NI achievable? No? How ideal it is? Is it achievable for the Philippines? Next slide. First, we have the resources. The Philippines is abundant in agricultural resources. There is also a regular rainy season in the Philippines, with rivers and springs that are sources of irrigation for crops. Currently, there are 12.4 million hectares of agricultural land in the Philippines that have different crops that produces the country's agricultural wealth. Rice is the top product produced, followed by coconut, corn, banana, sugarcane, cassava, mango, rubber, etc. Second, we have a plentiful marine resources. Our entire country is surrounded by rich water resources. We have more than 200 million hectares of oceans, 421 rivers, and 669 lakes. No? We have the largest lake in Southeast Asia, no? And that is the Laguna de Bai. The amount of fish available in the Philippines is massive. The West Philippine Sea, as reported in studies, contributes about 7% of the marine resources for the Philippines. And in 2011, we are recognized as the 5th fish producer in the world. The Philippines is also rich in mineral resources. We are recognized as the 5th nation in the world with the highest mineral resources. Approximately, there are about 58.1 billion metric tons of total mineral research in the country. Most of these 13 of these are metallic, and 29 are non-metallic minerals. No? We are 3rd in the world in the extraction of gold, 4th in copper, 5th in nickel, and 6th in chromite around the world. So imagine the land, how small the land area in the Philippines, and yet we are ranked 3rd in terms of mineral resources. In terms of energy resources, there are many energy resources in the Philippines. We are very rich in natural gas, geothermal energy, which constitute about 39.5 trillion cubic feet reserves of natural gas in the Philippines. We can also utilize boiling water underground near volcanoes, which has an enormous potential in the Philippines. In fact, we are the 2nd to the United States as the largest producer of geothermal energy in the world. Aside from those resources, the potential of our human resource is also huge. Based on a report by the government in 2014, more than 26 million skilled workers live in the Philippines. Around 2 million of these workers are professional workers, and this still does not include those who are unemployed. And the Philippines is also recognized as one of the largest skilled labor sources in the world. Next slide. So in terms of our question, whether NI is achievable, of course, it's a big yes. Next slide. Now, what are the hindrances to achieving NI? For a long time, our economy has only developed for the interest of large capitalist countries, particularly the United States, to be the supplier of raw materials and cheap labor force for their country's framework of huge assembly line or global value chain. We also continue to depend on products from outside the country to address the needs of the Filipino consumers. And this has been ongoing and protected because of neoliberal policies, which includes agreements under the WTO, the APEC, and the ASEAN. In this situation, the growth opportunity for the local industry in the country, as Jill has discussed a while ago, is essentially destroyed because in fact it provokes the composition of industries. Now we call it deindustrialization. The share of manufacturing and construction in GDP has slipped down since the 1960s. And it is the character of our economic system that prevents this national industrialization. This is further aggravated by the lack of interest of previous and current administration on promoting national industrialization. Okay. Next slide, please. Jill, the previous slide with the export import. That's why with national industrialization, we destroy this unfair, exploitative, and environmentally destructive export-oriented and import-dependent economy. Next slide. So what should we do? What can we do to be able to promote national industrialization? First would be the main objective of NI is to respond to the basic demands of the people for job security, adequate salary, and local self-sufficiency. So the interest of the people must come first. So effective citizen participation from planning until the actual operation of firm, ensure clever and sustainable use of natural resources. And therefore, we must arouse, we must arouse and educate the people on the current state of science and technology and national industry to different fora, colloquium, educational discussion, etc. Next slide. Next, we must organize ourselves. We must organize ourselves and expand our organizations that will carry out our advocacies while mobilizing and linking arms with different sectors and organizations that can also forward this cause. By doing so, next slide, by arousing and expanding, we can explore different ways to push for NI, such as lobbying our state leaders, also in Canada, arousing our OFWs, and pushing to be able to push for the resumption of peace talks between the National Democratic Front of the Philippines and the government of the Republic of the Philippines, where NI is recognized as a substantial part of the agenda for socio-economic reform. Next slide. So in conclusion, to end our presentation, the current state of science and technology in the Philippines is backward and stunted, as we have seen in the previous slides. And the government's prioritization of research and development and the science and technology sectors from other aspects in the Philippine economy and society, and the many symptoms of the bigger problem. These are just the state of science and technology in the Philippines is only one of the symptoms of a bigger problem. Next slide. And the dismal situation of our country, society, and science and technology is born from the decades of policies that only serve a few and making our relation similar to time. So to be able to achieve that, we need to arouse, organize, and mobilize the broadest ranks of our people to forward national industrialization. Thank you.
All right, awesome. That's great. Mark, do you mind maybe stop sharing screen for a moment? All right, cool. Yeah, thank you so much, Jill and Marlon, for that very informative presentation on science and technology and its relation to national development in the Philippines. So a lot of what you all were talking about is, I think, very relevant to the kind of issues we want to address in Anakbayan. So, we mentioned earlier that because there is a lack of jobs in the Philippines, many workers are forced to leave the country for better economic opportunities, including healthcare workers, as you said. And so that's especially relevant when we consider that, just a few days ago, the Ontario government, was requesting healthcare workers from the Philippines. So, despite the Philippines experiencing a shortage, as you said, in healthcare workers, the Canadian state understands that the Philippines is limited in opportunities and has no problem kind of like taking essential workers away from Filipinos for their own benefit, which is a very blatant display of imperialism, I feel. So with that being said, Jill and Marlon, we're gonna give like 5 minutes to do like a brief question and answer, and we got a question here that's kind of relevant to that. This one's from Benjamin, and either of you can answer this, or both of you if you want. So this one's from Benjamin. Is it the case that the Philippines educates enough science workers but cannot employ them? Or is it necessary also to increase the number of science workers and the capacity to produce science workers? So if anyone wants to take that.
So I can go first. So just to repeat, no. So the question was, does the Philippines educate enough science workers? Is that it?
Yeah. Do they educate enough science workers, and is it just the case that they can't employ them, or do they have to increase the number of science workers that they educate, that they produce?
I think that we have so many science workers and aspiring scientists, no, young people who even in their elementary school days, no, would aspire to become scientists, science workers, health workers, but in the end, they don't, they're not able to achieve these goals because, first, as I mentioned earlier, there is not enough support in terms of science education, no, both for the teachers and for the students. A lot of them don't even get to college, don't graduate from universities. So there's that. And then also there is a lack of industries, no, that will help support our science workers, our scientists, our engineers. And that's why they end up going abroad. They end up studying abroad and staying there, no, instead of going back instead of staying in the Philippines. So um, the quantity, it's not really because we're not the government, or we don't get well, part of it is that there's poor quality of education, but it's really because it's rooted at the lack of support by the government. So many people would want to become scientists, but it just there's not enough opportunities for them.
I think it's also because I think increasing the number is not only the solution. There's a study conducted that for every 100 students, Filipino students who enters grade 1, only 14 of them will be able to finish college. And the, of course, those 14 are not, most of them are not science workers nor science technologists. That's the basic problem. Second would be, given the export oriented, import dependent, these scientists do not have a place in terms of when we look back at the paradigm of science and technology and national development. Most of our scientists do not have a place in an export oriented, import dependent economy. That's why they tend to be workers that either accept low-paying jobs, or they become technologists in the sense that they only operate machines or they only collect data. But there's no really uh, uh, there's no participation in terms of how their work contributes to national development. So I think the basic the basic thing that we need to do really is to really change, no? To change the policy and to change the system.
Right. Thank you. And just briefly, we'll have one more time, or we have more time for one more question, but a lot of people got questions for you guys. So we will have a larger or general discussion at the end of this. So thank you everyone for sending in your questions. We'll try to get to all of them. We have one more from Andy right now. So what is an appropriate form of support from overseas science and technology workers now and during national industrialization? And will there need to be a reverse brain drain process?
Sorry, was that appropriate support from science workers?
Yeah, from science, from overseas science and technology workers.
So what support can overseas science workers provide? Is that it? In order to um, boost national industrialization, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's important that overseas science workers, no, are in solidarity with the science workers here in the Philippines. So Sir Marlon mentioned earlier, no, about this, no, conducting fora and talks, no, about the situation in the Philippines, and then there's also organizing amongst themselves to um, call for the government support, no, for these for our science workers here. And another thing that I would like to mention is uh, there in, for example, in Canada, in global north countries where they may be, uh, it's important that they also link with the migrant workers there, no, even if um, they're not science workers, no, they may be from other industries, especially because the reason why they migrated there is because there's a lack of national industries here. And actually, even if they migrate, I'm sure you know this, even if they migrate abroad, no, they go to different countries and live there, even if it's in a first world country, um, we know that a lot of them are still exploited. You know, some of them I know they get paid lower wages compared to their foreign counterparts. You know, I think that's a thing that anak bayan and your uh, fellow activists, no, can work on, no, or you can work with these migrant organizations.
Yeah. All right. Definitely. Um, Thank you for answering those questions, Adham, and thank you for the presentation. We'll get to more questions at the end of this discussion. Uh, but for now, we're going to move on. We actually got some cultural performances ready for us. So if you're ready, the first cultural performance is a member of Anagbayan Toronto. Uh, so they're gonna be doing Ang Lupa Ay Buhay. So Charity, you all ready?
Once I described my childhood.
Sorry, wrong video. What's that?
Karaniwang hanap buhay, karaniwan ang problema, pagkain, damit at tirahan. Di ko kabisado yang siyensya, ako'y nalilito sa maraming salita. Alam ko lang na itong planeta'y walang kapalit at dapat ingatan. Kapag nasira, sino ang kawawa? Karaniwang tao, saan ka tatakbo? Kapag nawasak, iisang mundo. Karaniwang tao, anong magagawa upang bantayan ang kalikasan? Karaniwang bagay ay di pansin, kapag naipon ay nagiging suliranin. Konting basura ngayon'y bundok, kotseng sira ay umuusok, sabong panlabay pumapatay sa ilog. May lason nga galing sa industriya, ibinubuga ng mga pabrika. Ngunit di lamang higante ang nagkakalat ng dumi, may kinalaman din ang tulad natin. Karaniwang tao, saan ka tatakbo? Kapag nawasak, iisang mundo. Karaniwang tao, anong magagawa upang bantayan ang kalikasan?
Nice. That was awesome, Charity. That was really cool. Was not expecting that on the door frame. Cool. That was very beautiful art. Thank you for that. Next up, we got a performance by another Anakbayan Toronto member, Alquin. They're gonna be performing How Much More.
Hello, everyone. Just give me 1 second. Okay. I will just stand up. Yeah, so part of this is like improv. Just because I wanna make it authentic to what was being learned too. But so yeah, this is an original. How much longer can they give for the well runs dry? Does it shock you that we receive convenience from their decline? Do you feel they believe the stories from their eyes? Do you see how much longer? How much longer can we wait before the smoke fills our skies? How much longer can they wait for the lies come before the goal? And you know that you see, that you know
shock you before we would know. How much more can we give before the well runs dry? Did you feel that we could survive? Does it shock you that we know receive convenience from their decline? Does it shock you that we receive convenience from their decline?
Okay, that's about something like that. Okay.
Yeah, that ruled, Al. Got a couple people asking single drop when, so feel free to drop your Spotify or anything if you want to. But
No,
yeah,
this is Earth Day.
no, this is Earth Day. This is about Earth Day. But thank you for that, Al. That was great. So we're gonna take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll hear from some more speakers. All right, cool. Okay, so next up, we're going to be hearing from the Center for Environmental Concerns, or CEC, which is a nonprofit org founded through the initiatives of organizations representing fisherfolk, farmers, indigenous peoples, women, urban poor, and professional sectors. They are currently based in Quezon City, Metro Manila, while their area of operation and networking covers the entire Philippines and different ecological contexts. So CEC works to cultivate environmental awareness and action, create a community of advocates, and contribute to the defense of ecosystems and peoples through empowering education, community-based research, and people-oriented, patriotic, and scientific advocacy. So representing CEC today is Pia Federico. Pia is an advocate of the CEC under the Training and Community Services Program. She joined CEC in 2019 and has been involved in environmental education and technical support for grassroots communities experiencing environmental issues. So yeah, we're gonna pass it off to Pia now.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Justin. Can you hear my voice? Is it loud and clear? I'm just gonna share my slides. All right. Can you see it now? Okay. So good day, everyone. Good evening for those people there in Canada. And first, I would like to greet you a meaningful belated Earth Day. So I hope you continue to fight for the environment and for the rights of the people. And also here in the Philippines, it's May 1, so it's Labor Day. So my discussion for today would revolve around this very pressing issue or environmental issue in the country, which is none other than mining. And I hope that through this discussion, we'll be able to see the need to reorient the mining industry towards national industrialization in the country. So I will open my talk by sharing with you one of the campaigns of my organization, along with other environmental groups here in the Philippines. So it's the campaign against the operations of OceanaGold. So if you haven't heard of OceanaGold, it is a Canadian-based mining company which headquarters is in British Columbia. So they have a project and Didipio, which is a barangay in the municipality of Casibu. Casibu is in Nueva Vizcaya, which is located in the northernmost part of the Philippines. So if you may ask if any one of you here have relatives in Nueva Vizcaya or have roots in Nueva Vizcaya. Maybe you can show your hands if there are any of you. Let me see. I think there is none. Oh, there is none. But anyway, going back to my discussion, wait. Okay. Well, going back to my discussion, the Oceana Gold Philippines Incorporated is a subsidiary of Oceana Gold, which is located in Didipio. So again, they have a mining project, which is the Didipio Gold Copper Project. And OGPI is the very first company to be granted the financial or technical assistance agreement by the Philippine government. So basically, the FTA is an agreement made between the contractor and the President of the Philippines for large-scale mining exploration, development, and utilization of minerals. And the FTA allows 100% foreign ownership and even offers some incentives and tax exemptions to mining companies that want to invest here in the country. So as you know, it just legitimizes the foreign ownership of mining in the Philippines. So, but the FTA of Oceana Gold Philippines Incorporated already expired way back in June 2019. So it was already like 2 years ago that their FTA expired. But even though their FTA has already expired, they still insisted in continuing their operations. So they were claiming that they were filing for contract agreement renewal, but actually before the regional trial court denied their request. But just this February 2021, we got the news that Oceana Gold Philippines Incorporated is on its final terms of renewing their permit. And it's really, really alarming considering that the people here in the Philippines are still suffering from the pandemic or the economic burdens that are brought about by the pandemic, especially in the people there in Nueva Vizcaya. There are really lots of indigenous people and poor people relying on agriculture. So since Oceana Gold has been operating in the country, it also has been inflicting a lot of environmental problems in the area of the mine site. So among those environmental impacts of Oceana Gold are the irreversible topographical changes, since it converted the Dingkidi Hill into an open pit mine. So as you know, when there is an open pit mine, then the whole mountain or the whole hill is like denuded, right? And then in 2019, before the pandemic, my organization, CEC, conducted a fact-finding mission, and the volunteers, including scientists who participated in that fact-finding mission, found out that one of the major effects of the operation of Oceana Gold is the depletion of water sources. And this has largely affected the domestic needs and even the agricultural needs of the people who are residing in the area, since the operation of Oceana Gold resulted in the drying up of wells and creeks. So the people there, even Oceana Gold, like provided them with pumps or poso. Do you know poso? They can't even get water out of their like underground. So that resulted to the reduced agricultural activity, as what the farmers have informed those who volunteered in our fact-finding mission. And apart from this, there are also native trees killed due to the mine tailings. So at least 100 native trees were killed due to mine tailings. And as by the way, these are the pictures of the part of the mine site. So on the left side, it's the dried up creek. And on the right side, it's the Dinkidi Hill that was converted into an open pit mine. So aside from the environmental impacts of the operation, what's even equally bad are the human rights violations that OceanaGold Philippines Incorporated and of course its parent company OceanaGold has committed to the residents of the DPO and its nearby provinces. So in the previous slide, I've shown you this picture. So they are the people who installed the people's barricade or the human barricade at the entrance of OceanaGold. So they wanted to stop the entry of the fuel, like the materials that will be used for the operation of OceanaGold, since, like what I said, the FTAA of OceanaGold already expired and they are supposed to stop their operation. So just days after Nueva Vizcaya and like the whole Philippines was set into lockdown due to COVID-19 pandemic last April 2020, so it was a year ago already, the Philippine National Police attempted to dismantle the People's Barricade. So there was a violent dispersal during the middle of a lockdown. And just recently, we got an information that the barangay officials who support the people's opposition were suspended by the municipal government just this month. And we fear that in that period of suspension of the barangay officials who support the people's barricade, the renewal of OceanaGold's permit will be railroaded. And that would be really problematic, especially in this time that we are dealing with the pandemic. And aside from this, OGPI also failed to obtain community consent from indigenous people. So they were arguing that there were really no indigenous people in the area, but there actually are indigenous people, and those are the Bugkalot and Tuwali tribe, like what Jill mentioned a while ago. So their ancestral domain is located within the vicinity of the mine site. And also, the members of the community were militarized several times, and the leaders and members of local organizations that are formed to oppose the operation of OceanaGold also experienced harassment and even red tagging. So if you aren't, or some of you aren't familiar with red tagging, the government here in the Philippines are labeling dissenters as members of terrorist groups or members of the Communist Party of the Philippines, which they tag as terrorists here in the Philippines. And so, why am I discussing the issue of OceanaGold? Aside from you as youth there in Canada, on which OceanaGold is based in, the situation between OceanaGold Philippines Incorporated and the people of the DPO is not an isolated case. The same situation happens in many parts of the Philippines. As you know, there are many mining companies operating here in the Philippines, as like what Marlon said earlier, we are one of the countries that are mineral rich. So foreign investors really want to extract minerals from our country. And just a couple of weeks ago, the Duterte administration lifted a 9-year ban on new mining deals by the virtue of Executive Order 130. And this even worsened the mining situation here in the Philippines. And Duterte says that the government is reopening the minings and lifting the moratoriums on mining that were previously imposed in the previous terms to augment the economy or to improve the economy of the country that was badly hit by the pandemic. And he also argues that it would offer jobs to the Filipino people who lost their jobs in this time. But the question is, will it really do so? So let's go back to the characteristic of mining in the country. It was already discussed, if I'm not mistaken, by Marlon. So like the characteristic or the orientation of the economy of the country, the mining in the Philippines is also import dependent and export oriented. So what do we mean by import dependent and export oriented mining? So basically, the extracted raw ores are being exported to other countries, and then the finished products in which those ores were made into are imported here in the Philippines. So as you know, the raw ores do not really have like a high value. Their value is just really low since they aren't processed yet. So we import the products that are already processed in a very, very high value. And in Pinoy's term, lugi tayo, kung ganun. So as you can see in this slide, we only carry out until initial processing of the raw ores. So we don't really like have a refining and smelting processing plants in the country and even fabrication plants in the country that could turn the ores into a more valuable mineral. And here on the pie graph, it says that only 6% of the mineral production value generated from 1997 to 2017 goes to the domestic needs, and 94% goes to the exports. And this is even aggravated by the existence of the Philippine Mining Act of 1995, which allows 100% foreign ownership on mining as it removed trade barriers and ownership restriction on mining. So CEC has been lobbying since 2009 uh, a counter act to the Philippine Mining Act of 1995, which is the People's Mining Bill. But to no avail, the government, I think, has no plans in pushing for that bill that would actually like reverse the character of mining in the country. And as like what I said, Duterte's argued that mining would contribute to the boost of the economy in the country, but it won't really, because mining's contribution to GDP or to the gross domestic product is just very low. It barely is 1% of the country's GDP compared to what agriculture and forestry contributes to the GDP. And it's quite ironic that we are intensifying mining in the country if it would actually hurt the agriculture sector that contributes more to the GDP. And it also has a low contribution to employment. So it's just like 0.15% of employment. So what do we want now? So what do we want mining to be in the Philippines? Simple. So like what the theme of this event is, we want mining industry to be reoriented for national industrialization. And we can do so by reversing the export-oriented and import-dependent mining and economy. And instead of catering to the global demands or to the foreign market, we want mining to cater to our domestic needs. And also, it must enhance the capacity of food production and security and ensure that the production of farm machineries and tools and infrastructure materials for agriculture. So like what Marlon discussed earlier, industrialization is basically the transition from an industrial-based economy to from an agricultural-based economy to an industrial-based economy. And one of the major factors that can help us in achieving so is the heavy industries. And we can even have a good medium industries and even basic or base industries. So we see that if we reorient the mining industry for national industrialization, we could be able to develop those levels of industries, especially the heavy industries that could help us achieve an industrialized economy. And mining should also be pro-environment and pro-people. So since we want mining to be reoriented for national industrialization, and that means we want it to be needs-based. So mining should be in accordance with the availability of resources and the capacity of the environment. So we won't extract beyond what we need for our country. And it must also guarantee the participation of local community and prioritize the health and safety of the surrounding communities, which is neglected by the foreign owned mining companies. And also, of course, recognize the rights of indigenous people, which is being trampled on by the big mining companies here in the Philippines. So how can we achieve our goal to reorient mining towards national industrialization? Of course, we need concrete and urgent steps towards achieving our goal. And right now, there are a lot of people's initiative, both nationally and internationally, against the destructive mining projects here in the Philippines. And like what I said, one of these is the People's Barricade that the members of the community formed back in 2018. And there are also several organizations that are campaigning and organizing people on the ground. And also we launch national campaigns to promote a pro-people and pro-environment mining, like the Defend Patrimony. It is not stated on the slide, but I will mention several of the campaigns: Defend Patrimony, Scrap Mining Act of 1995, Environmental Defenders Congress, and just recently, the Planetary Emergency Initiative. So in the Planetary Emergency Initiative, we call for a green recovery post-pandemic, and that we demand the government to not return to business as usual, like the exploitative and destructive mining operations in Philippines, since many experts already warned governments to protect forests, protect our ecosystems, since zoonotic diseases like COVID-19 sprung out from the destruction of ecosystems and forests. And aside from those initiatives, we also conduct policy lobbying. So like what I mentioned earlier, we lobby the People's Mining Bill, which is like a counterpart bill of the Philippine Mining Act of 1995. And also, we engage in international work. So we want to garner international solidarity to oppose destructive mining projects and other environmentally destructive projects here in the Philippines. And we have formed several organizations like the IPCM, or International People's Conference on Mining, and the Asia Pacific Network for Environmental Defenders. So it's also an issue here in the Philippines. The issue of environmental defenders here in the Philippines is also a big issue in the Philippines, as the Philippines is one of the deadliest countries for environmental defenders. So those people who are defending their natural resources from companies that exploit them, and from companies that do not really regard the rights of the people, are being killed by state forces. So you, if you're interested in supporting the People's Initiative, then we are very much open in your volunteerism. So maybe you can like ask other organizations there in Canada, other youth organizations there in Canada, as you know, the youth really has a strong voice against environmental destruction, since like what you are familiar with, the youth leads the campaign for climate justice in the globe. So I also hope that you can network us to those organizations. And if you want to join an organization or like support the campaign, one of the organizations there in Canada, it's Kairos, if you know Kairos, and it's also they're also active in opposing OceanaGold and other destructive mining projects. And that's it for my presentation. So thank you for listening. And again, happy Earth Day. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Pia. Happy Earth Day to you too. Thank you for that great presentation. It was very informative, but also very frustrating because you kind of saw how the PNP and state forces are so willing to undermine the safety of indigenous communities and even violently attack them for the sake of financially benefiting foreign companies, many of which are Canadian. And the fact that you said only 1% or only mining makes up only 1% of the GDP kind of really exposes the lies that we're told about industry in the Philippines. To put into perspective, Rosie in the chat mentioned that remittances from Filipino migrant workers make up 10% of the GDP, which just goes to show how little industry is developed in the Philippines when something like remittances props up the economy to such a high extent. So Pia, we do got a couple questions for you. If we can stop sharing the screen real quick, Mark. We got a question from the audience. This one's from Angela. So Pia, has CEC tried to seek remedy for the human rights violations under OceanaGold at the international level, such as to the Canadian government?
Okay, so as far as I am concerned, we lobbied the issue of OceanaGold to the international human rights, like the international human rights institutions. So that is one of the steps we did to what do you call it, to solve this problem. So this is one of the institutions that we lobbied the issue into is the UN Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights. So we also like told their situation to the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights. But in the Canadian government, we still aren't connected with them. So I think you could help in those steps.
All right, thank you. And Pia, another question for you. This one's from Rosie. What are the conditions of the workers who operate the mines in Didipio and other mines in the Philippines?
Okay, so like generally the workers in the Philippines have low wages, and those include the workers in the mine sites, and they also don't have proper or humane working conditions. As you know, when you go into a mining site, they like are exposed to chemicals, to pollution, and these mining companies aren't really providing them with safety equipment and even protective gear that could protect them from these chemicals. Okay. And aside from this, the mining companies are dividing the community, like those who work for the mine site and those who oppose the mining operation. Since, like in the DPO, um, the workers in the mine site are relatives with the people opposing the mining operation. So, um, like Oceana Gold is um, telling the workers to stop their relatives in opposing the operation of Oceana Gold. So I think it's also the situation with other mining companies here in the Philippines.
All right, cool. Thank you for answering those, Pia. So we got a few more questions that people wanted to ask. Hopefully you can stick around to the end so we can get to those questions. So now we're just gonna move on, actually. We got another cultural performance by a member of Nakbayan Toronto. Lil Wayne's, sorry, is going to be performing Bird Nest. So if you wanna take it away, Wayne's.
Once I described my childhood, not through pictures or a song, but a story about a mother bird. I said, this mother bird, so motherly, it held me warm in our nest, and it did what it could as it should to cover up a hole left by a fallen fruit. I said, this here is my mother. Not once did I mention my father who was stationed all the way in Saudi, where there's hot sand, I imagined, and a lot of dry throats. But not once did I mention all the food he has sent, the money for our rent, just how far away he flew, only to be a fallen fruit leaving a hole in our nest. I said, that there is my father. But a little bird I was then, blind still with sleeping eyelids, too naive to notice all the grass and leaves my dad weaved where it is needed. Too young to understand and too hurt to notice the security he provided. All the homes I've had, he had built with my mom. Scraps, dirt, bricked or wooded. Once I asked him about a painting he left at home. Who is this woman holding a baby and all alone? And this man carrying a dead body. Where is this place? It's so dark and scary. Enthusiastic to solve the mystery, I said, it's mom in misery, isn't it? But then that would make the man my dad, and someone would actually be dead. I was too young, he said, and then I was too blind. The paint is fading and the lines are blurred. But today the painting looked clearer than it ever would if I didn't learn the truth that it holds. How the conditions of the worker's life is told. Here, workers, millions in a tight space, get millions leaving with a small pay, millions for a damn race, for more millions to damn slay, through sickness if not a bullet, through work forced to risk it, left the ones trying to make it. Some said it is life as they knew it, either stay here or leave it. These are the choices my parents had. I thought perhaps that could have really been my dad, and it was my mom with whoever's unfinished face. But I refused to accept that this is an unchanging fate for millions upon millions of our race. So I joined with the millions with a strong base who are pushing for the right case, cause we all have a right to say we should be able to build our home in our own place.
Wow, that was very powerful. That was amazing. Um, thank you, Waynes. And now we're gonna hear from the International Coalition for Human Rights Toronto chapter. They are part of a global network of organizations of Filipinos and non-Filipinos concerned about the human rights situation in the Philippines. iChirp is committed to campaigning for just and lasting peace in the Philippines. And their aim is to inform the international community about the grave human rights situation in the Philippines today. So please welcome the iChirp Toronto coordinator presenting for us today, Zara. You can take it away, Zara. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. I feel like I have to process that poem. Very touching. But thank you, Manakbayan, for having us here. And I believe I have, Marge, who's helping me move the slides.
Yes, just let me know when you need the next one.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Yeah, so we can move on to the first slide. So hi, everyone. Again, my name is Sarah. I'm one of the coordinators of iChirp. Thank you again, Anakbayan, for having us. So national industrialization is definitely a topic that needs to be discussed by people abroad who are interested in the welfare of Filipinos within the Philippines and outside of the Philippines. In my sort of short presentation here, I want to share with you the work of iChirp and the role of the international solidarity as an integral part of the people's movement for the Philippines. That not only educates the broader community here in Turtle Island, but also engages and holds governments, big corporations, people in power accountable to human rights atrocities they have brought to the Philippines. And it's kind of a different turn from the other presentation that's happened tonight. So for those who are not familiar, the Toronto chapter of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, or iChirp Toronto, is part of the global community contributing to the efforts of exposing, again, the grave human rights situation in the Philippines that's inflicted by the reactionary Philippine government and intervention by foreign nations and corporations to the country. At iChirp, we aim to engage Filipinos and non-Filipinos who want to work in solidarity with the understanding that the Filipino people deserve basic human rights and the right to a lasting peace in the country. And I just want to share some history of solidarity work on human rights with you. Next slide, please. For decades, solidarity campaigns for the Philippines have existed. However, this was intensified during the martial law era when more Filipinos were sent abroad for work and as Filipino activists seek asylum in other countries. Many Filipinos abroad deeply care about the human rights situation in the Philippines and have shared this with the international community. We have seen this in the way our elders in the community engage their church and other community groups through typhoon relief fundraisers to organizing protests in front of the Philippine Embassy. This work is being carried by young people like yourselves in the People's Movement. And I'm sure Anakbayan, before it was Anakbayan, it was something else, right? iChirp was born out of the national formation of the Philippines in the Philippines against the political repression and the campaign against the heightening extrajudicial killings in the Philippines during the time of the previous president, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Next slide, please. The campaign in 2006 against extrajudicial killings, or EJKs, was extended to the global community through an international campaign called Stop the Killings campaign, or Stop the Killings in the Philippines. In the same year, the families of victims of extrajudicial killings and other victims of GMA's government formed a coalition called Justicia and filed charges before the Permanent People's Tribunal and then found Arroyo, US President George W. Bush, and their respective governments guilty of crimes against the Filipino people. Continued human rights violations led Philippine human rights defenders to call upon their foreign friends to come to the Philippines, bear witness to the ever worsening situation, and come together for the International Conference for Human Rights and Peace in the Philippines. And it was during this time that iChirp was formalized in July 2013, Quezon City, Philippines. There were over 168 delegates coming from 26 different countries abroad. You can see in the presentation, I don't know if you're familiar with Noy Noying, and there's GMA with her Donia fan. Next slide, please. In Canada, oh, next slide again. In Canada, it was in May 2019 that iChirp Canada was launched in Ottawa. And while regional formations like OCHIRP in Ottawa and Toronto have existed years before iChirp Canada was formalized. And here in Canada, we have had multiple campaigns under the Stop the Killing campaign banner before iChirp was formalized as well. And next slide, please. Yes, so that's the Stop the Killings campaign banner. And next slide again. For years, the Philippine and Canada-based organizations have organized speaking tours for labor and Indigenous leaders to share and learn from each other's struggles. Actually, next slide, did I go over? Yes, there you go. Some of the recent ones was of the Lumad Tour in 2017, which included the now Bayan Muna House Representative, Eufemia Campos Culiamat from Liangas, Surigao, and Nenita Condes from the Federation of Subanan Group in Zamboanga del Norte. They were accompanied by then member of Philippine Congress of Bayan Muna Party List, Carlos Zarate, with Bishop Antonio Ablon of the Anglican Church, IFI, and Dr. Annie Bautista of the Ecumenical Voice for Peace and Human Rights in the Philippines, or EcuVoice. The screenshots you see on the slides, they are from Kairos, as was mentioned earlier by CAC. Kairos is one of the big organizations that Canada partners with, the Canada and Philippine organizations partner with. And next slide, please. Yeah, so these were our visitors from back then in 2017. And then next slide. iChirp Canada does the work of lobbying and conducting coordinated campaigns, as you know. And in the past years, here are some of the wins of the lobbying work and making noise of iChirp in Canada. We have helped cancel the helicopter deal with the Trudeau government in 2018. iChirp have also met with the Global Affairs Canada to look into military and trade deals with the Philippines and what it does to the Filipino people. This also involved meetings with MPs locally. And right now, if you can, I believe I have a slide on this one. Yeah, right now we have built up the lobbying work from the recent House of Commons petition with Mining Watch Canada that was tabled last February by MP Heather McPherson in Alberta. Some of you may have signed, and I know AB Canada has helped with this petition campaign to a success. So thank you for that. And a couple of our main demands in the petition are to have Canadian companies be tried in a Canadian court for the human rights violation and environmental degradation they have caused while conducting their businesses in other countries, and for the Canadian government to be held accountable for the financial and political support they provide to governments such as the Philippine government, who are implicated in the abuse of human rights of their own citizens. No? And there's actually a scheduled briefing on the current situation in the Philippines. It's scheduled this May 4th, and you can watch this online. There's going to be a media advisory coming out pretty soon. It's something pretty big, and I think Anak Bayan and other organizations should really look into it. Currently, the campaigns of iChirp are as follows. I think it's on the next slide, please. And I know some of you are familiar with these campaigns. Some of you may be part of the coordinating committee. And so our solidarity work outside of the Philippines is there to support the struggle for land, water rights of the indigenous peoples, laborers, and farm workers, among others. Next slide, please. And so with the growing militarized response of the Duterte government to this pandemic and his human rights track record, along with the disappointing decision of the UN Human Rights Council in its 45th session, an independent international commission of investigation into human rights violation in the Philippines, or Investigate PH, was established and led by ICHRP. So this is because between 2015 and 2019, the UN Human Rights Office documented at least 248 extrajudicial killings of human rights defenders, legal professionals, journalists, and trade unionists in relation to their work. And indigenous peoples asserting their right to self-determination and protection of their ancestral domains, as well as peasants asserting their land rights, are also primary targets of killings. And the passing of Executive Order 70 in December 2018 created the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, and the 2020 enactment of the controversial Anti-Terrorism Act are very significant elements of which violate international standards of human rights. Now, the thing is, with national industrialization in the perspective of governments such as the government of the Philippines, the way they see it is to clear the path, clear off government opposition. For example, the current government's build economic strategy of dams and continuing to open up the country by lifting the 9-year moratorium on the Philippine Mining Act of 1995 for foreign corporations to take raw resources from the country, even while knowing this only it contributes to less than 1% of the country's national gross domestic product. The number that I have here is 0.89%. And that's, as was mentioned earlier, the remittances of migrants are way more than this. And this is where the issue of land rights of the Luma, the IPs of the Cordillera, the Mangyans, of Mindoro, the Putumandoks, among others, come in. The path of prosperity envisioned by the Philippine government does not include the majority of the Filipino people. If you can move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, the Philippine natural resources, the labor of the Filipino people, the 10% of the Philippine population outside of the country, the fees the government collected from the over $1 billion remittances from Canada sent by migrant workers, the majority of it is not used to help develop the country's industries, as was mentioned from the previous guests of tonight's event. If you can move on to the next one, and maybe. Yes, okay. So the ones who envision genuine change in agrarian reform, a school system that is culturally relevant, for example, and the everyday Filipino who just want to help out their kababayans, like the community pantries that are popping up. The government, the Duterte followers, the Duterte government wants to see them gone. They see them as a threat. So the way we see it at ICHRP, our work for better human rights situation in the Philippines is a long-term commitment. National industrialization should be one of the priorities by and for the Filipino people. I'm just gonna end it here. We know there's so many to share and the work continues. If you are interested in joining ICHRP or know someone who may be interested, please do reach out. Daghang salamat and dugang kadasig. This is also us here where you can contact us, and our core coordinating committee, the 4 of us are there. Thank you.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Zara. Yeah, that was a great presentation. It's always kind of jarring to hear about, the Canadian state and Canadian companies' complicity in human rights violations abroad, because, throughout this event, we've kind of seen how deceitful the Philippine government is when they claim to support the people, but engage in violence toward them when it's like economically beneficial. So I think it's also important to point out, the hypocrisy that Canada displays when they claim to be upholders of human rights, yet they have no issue with violating the rights of those abroad, by supporting these abusive governments. So thank you for that. And now I guess it's time for question and answer period, a general question and answer period. Maybe we'll get to some questions that we weren't able to get to earlier. We're just going to allocate 10 minutes to this. So hopefully we'll get to as many questions as we can. We apologize if we can't get to everything. But yeah, so I guess the first question, this is actually for Agham. This one is from Jeff. I have a question about the environmental damage. If there is enough irreversible damage that would affect national industrialization. Is anyone from Agham here? Also, Jeff, are you still here?
Yes, I'm still here.
All right, cool. Yeah. Jeff, do you think you could clarify this question real quick?
Oh, sure. I guess I was responding to a slide referring to the mining disaster. I was just wondering if, given the plans, the initiative towards national industrialization, if there is currently too much environmental damage or like irreversible environmental damage that might affect that from happening. I didn't add this to the question, but I guess like, is there anything that other countries can do, or even the homeland can do to ensure that this doesn't progress any further?
Okay, maybe I can answer. Yes, no. Well, there are areas that we consider to be environmentally degraded. I think there are still communities who are resisting and fighting to sustain their natural resources, to be able to manage them on their own, independently, without foreign concessions coming in. So they were able to sustain this, the richness of these resources. I think that with national industrialization, these communities would be at the forefront of the struggle, for national industrialization. As Sir Marlon mentioned earlier, national industrialization, it rests on a planned economy, which is ecologically sound. So it shouldn't be like how first world countries do it, where they keep on extracting in order to create surplus goods, which they would sell to other countries, where they will gain super profits. But that's not what we want. And in terms of the irreversible damage, I think that rehabilitation would definitely be part of national industrialization, and that includes holding those polluters responsible and accountable for the damages that they've caused to the ecosystems. Maybe it's of course there's a discussion if it's going to be in local courts or international courts, but as uh, as for people in the homeland, here, and also for you folks in abroad, you know that's definitely going to be part of our struggle. Like for example in Canada, right before even until now, there is what's this waste trade. Canada dumped their waste to the Philippines, and international groups and both international and local groups supported the call to take back their trash and not make the Philippines a dump site. So there is part of what you can do is holding them accountable for what they do and forcing them to contribute to the rehabilitation of these degraded ecosystems.
All right, thank you. And this next question can actually be for either iChirp or CEC, or if you both want to answer, that's cool too. This is from Alquin. When mining is extracted in Philippines, does it get labeled as a resource from the Philippines, or would it be the mining company's country of origin?
Um, can I answer the question?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm not really sure about it, but I think the ore is labeled as our product, but like the finished product, like what I mentioned earlier in my discussion, is labeled as the product of the country that extracted the ore from the Philippines. I think that's it, but I'm not really very familiar with it.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that question is because I think I when you're telling about the import and export like relationship, it's almost like it kind of, because there's not much knowledge when it comes to the extraction, especially for diasporas here. I thought it creates like not much talk about this kind of topic, even though it's something to be seriously addressed. And that's an observation. That's why I asked that.
Yeah, I don't
That's a
believe
good question, actually.
the end
Maybe
product is put or labeled from the Philippines.
because as far as I know, we buy the products that they made from the extracted minerals here in the Philippines. So I think it's their product really. That's why it doesn't really contribute much to our GDP, since it's not like really labeled as our product, like finished product.
Thanks, Pia.
Welcome.
All right, and this question is for Zara. It's from the chat, from Ange. I wanted to ask if you would be able to share more about what you expect to happen at the next parliamentary meeting regarding the Canadian ombudsperson for mining.
So this is specific for the mining campaign, right? And not the hearing that's coming up on May 4th.
Either one.
Sure, yeah, I can share. I'll share first the hearing that's coming up, because the hearing is a bit more, it is specific but also general, because the people that iChirp suggested to be interviewed to be part of this hearing, not all of them were selected. Ideally, what was planned is to have from our national campaigns, like Defend Negros Island, Cordy, and the mining industry, there would have been representatives prioritized in the speaking during this hearing, but the main person would be with Karapatan. So right now, it's Maria Ressa, who will be talking about what happened to her, and also Tinay of Karapatan, who will be speaking at the hearing on May 4th, in addition to a representative of iChirp in Quebec. So unfortunately, the list was shortlisted, but the general topics would be the overall situation of the human rights situation in the Philippines. And with relating to that, the human rights violation of mining companies, of course, will be highlighted, as well as the trade deals and military support that the Canadian government has been giving to the Philippines. Those will be brought up and questioned. Hopefully, anyways, they don't have that much time, but definitely it would be highlighting what's happening in the Philippines. In terms of the mining campaign, for the ombudsperson topic, it was discussed within internally in ICHRP that the way forward in this campaign is to not rely on the ombudsperson, really, because the Canadian government, even though there's that person sitting in there, they did not give a power, like actual powers to investigate Canadian companies. They did not give that to the ombudsperson. So it's basically just a person, their symbol, it's pretty useless, I think, because the idea was for them to be able to actually, investigate and look into, question these companies, and even in a way try to see how they can be held accountable in the Canadian government, right? But the government did not give them that power, so it's pretty useless. So our tactic would be to approach local MPs, to talk to them about the demands of the petition that was put through to the House of Commons. So, and that would be asking MPs to have Canadian companies accountable in the Canadian court, and to, question these trade deals that Canada has with the Philippines.
All right, cool. Thank you, Zara, and thank you, everyone, for for giving us so many great questions. Unfortunately, we got to stop there. We can't get to all of them for the sake of time. But if you have really pressing questions that you want to ask any of the people that just presented, we're going to be sharing their contact information with you. So we can share it on the chat, and so you can hit them up through those mediums. But yeah, so I guess we're just gonna wrap this up now. Can you start sharing again, Mark? All right, there you go. So I guess the question now is, what can we do as youth in Canada? So we can get organized. We like to say the people united will never be defeated. So you can, of course, join an Agbayan in Toronto. But if you're not Filipino, but interested in learning more about the socioeconomic conditions of the Philippines, check out the Canada-Philippines Solidarity Organization, CPSO. So likewise, check out iChirp Toronto to learn more about Canada's role in human rights abuses in the Philippines, and investigate PH's report on the current human rights abuses under the US-Duterte regime, and continue to demand accountability from the Canadian government. Next slide, please. You can also join us tomorrow for Activism is Not Terrorism, webinar hosted by Bayan Canada, to learn more about the mass movement in the Philippines and how overseas Filipinos can support and participate in the struggle of the Filipino people. So yeah, again, that's happening tomorrow, May 1, 8 p.m. And we'll link up in the chat how you can register. And finally, if you can get to the next slide. Yeah. Finally, if you are a Filipino youth working in food production, a grocery store, a restaurant, or even if you were formerly employed in the food industry as a youth, then please consider attending our Know Your Rights campaign launch that's happening next Wednesday, May 5th at 7 p.m. So as we said, the food industry has been critical in keeping our economy going during the pandemic, yet those who work in it have experienced neglect even before COVID hit. So the event will be an open discussion where we can share our experiences as young Filipinos working in the food industry. We would love to hear about your experiences as a worker. So if you can make it out, the link to register will be sent in the chat. All right, so that's a wrap. That's it. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to the speakers, Jill, Marlon from AGHAM. Thank you to Pia from CEC and Sarah from iTrip. Those were very informative presentations. I learned a lot. And you know, it was great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think we sent all the links in the chat. If you got any questions for iTrip, CEC, or AGHAM, just go to one of those links, ask them through there, and you know, come to the events too. Come to the events. We got plenty coming up. So thank you so much. And I hope you all have a great rest of your night or morning. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you to everybody who spoke today. Pia, Jill, Marlon, Sarah, thank you so much. And to all the cultural performers, thank you.